This content is a work of fiction inspired by regional folklore, urban legends, cultural storytelling traditions, and anecdotal reports submitted online. While presented in a documentary narrative format for immersion and entertainment, no claims are made regarding the factual accuracy of the events described. Join the Red Sky Collective, subscribe, like, and activate notifications so you're among the first to receive our next classified case file.
The Forgotten Brazilian UFO Case. The night something descended over São João Batista do Glória, 1996. The place where silence lives. There are places where the world feels older than time, where mountains keep secrets and rivers refuse to reveal what they have witnessed. Between the mysterious stone walls of the Serra de Canastra and the powerful stretch of the Rio Grande, stood the quiet Brazilian town of São João Batista do Glória. Life here followed the rhythm of the countryside. Cattle grazed beneath golden light. Families worked the land. Generations honored tradition. From this region came landscapes of breathtaking beauty, and cheeses believed by many to be among the finest Brazil has ever produced. But in 1996, as Brazil, and eventually the world, focused on the now legendary UFO events unfolding in Varginha, something else happened nearby. Something no one was prepared for. Something almost forgotten. Or perhaps deliberately kept that way. Because on those nights, the skies above São João Batista do Glória changed. And the town would never be the same. Before the unseen arrived. The year had begun like many others. Children walked dusty streets. Doors were left unlocked. Nights carried laughter, distant music, and the gentle song of insects in the warm Brazilian air. Then small things began to feel wrong. Men returning from distant farms said the stars no longer looked the same. Dogs barked toward invisible shapes in the sky. Some nights carried a metallic scent on the breeze. Whispers grew quiet in churchyards and markets, the kind of talk people dismiss in daylight, but never forget when darkness returns. And in the distance, the mountains waited silently. As if they already knew. Lights that did not belong. Late December 1995. The first lights appeared. They did not roar like planes or flicker like helicopters. They moved impossibly slow, drifting silently across the heavens as if gravity itself had failed. Residents described glowing spheres floating above fields, metallic shapes sliding across the sky without a sound, and beams of pale light scanning empty land. Some objects descended shockingly low. Farms were lit like stadiums in the night. Rooftops reflected strange illumination. Animals became restless. Radios filled with noise. Lights flickered. People closed their windows earlier. Fear was no longer rumor. Fear had become atmosphere. The night becomes a stranger. The town's rhythm changed. People hurried home before dark. The church filled with uneasy prayers. Men spoke in hushed tones. Women warned children not to stare at the sky. Whatever was happening was not random. It was escalating. And soon, the encounter would not be in the sky, but on the ground. The Canavial Incident. One warm January night, a group of students leaving evening classes walked along the road bordered by towering sugarcane fields. They were laughing. Until they weren't. Something moved inside the cane. A massive shadow shifted beneath the moonlight. The night seemed to swallow sound itself. A figure stepped partially into the dim glow. Tall. Broad. Covered in something like hair. Not animal. Not man. Something in between, and frighteningly aware. Then it moved. They ran. Footsteps slammed against the dirt. Breath shattered into gasps. Behind them, something huge crashed through the cane, snapping stalks, tearing earth, keeping pace. Then, light. Street lamps appeared ahead. They burst beneath them, turned back. And saw it. Standing just beyond the glow. Watching. Silent. Purposeful. Then it turned. And vanished into darkness. Police arrived within minutes. They found crushed vegetation. Deep tracks in the soil. Clear signs of something heavy and intelligent having been there. Yet the official explanation? Nothing happened. The town did not believe that for a second. Whispers older than the mountains. Old residents remembered stories. Stories from decades before. Stories no one wanted to discuss. A tall, hairy being. Walking upright. Intelligent. Observing. January 1996. Again. Once dismissed as myth. But legends do not chase schoolchildren beneath electric lights. Whatever existed in the sky now existed among them. Nights of broken power. Then came the blackouts. Whole neighborhoods died in darkness. Machines stalled. Radios died. Even the air felt heavy. Some residents swore they saw faint glowing forms above the town during those power collapses. Hovering. Watching. Silent. No explanation was ever publicly released. But science was no longer needed. Fear had learned to live inside people. Silence becomes law. The town stopped talking openly. Conversations turned to whispers. Strangers were avoided. Doors stayed locked. The church stayed full. Strange vehicles appeared on remote roads. Unidentified men asked quiet questions. No uniforms. No insignias. No answers. Then disappeared. Meanwhile, the sky remained patient. The searchlights. The final escalation came suddenly. Families watched enormous beams of blinding white light sweep silently across rural land, searching, selecting, choosing. Fields glowed like daylight. Hills shimmered. Rivers reflected something not of this world. Animals vanished. Something intelligent was moving through the land. Something with purpose. Then, as suddenly as it began. Silence. But silence no longer meant safety. Police mobilization. The intervention of authorities began gradually, almost unwillingly. At first, they dismissed the reports as mass imagination. But as testimonies multiplied, detailed, coherent, impossible to refute, the police were forced to treat the situation as real. Night patrols increased. Officers watched the skies. They pretended it was simply to calm the population. But fear lived among them too. Some officers reported seeing pale figures standing at rural roadsides, simply watching. Others experienced nausea, dizziness, and overwhelming sadness when approaching reported areas. These incidents were never officially recorded. But they leaked. Quietly. Carefully. And reached those willing to investigate what others feared to acknowledge. Among them, the dairy farm apparition. One of the most haunting events occurred at a major dairy farm outside town. Workers began their day as always. Engines hummed. Metal clanged. Cows bellowed. Then everything stopped. The power died. Machinery fell silent. Even the animals froze. And she appeared. A pale woman. Expression empty. Moving slowly between barns. Not disturbing soil. Not stirring dust. Cows stood completely motionless. No blinking. No movement. No sound. A worker tried to call out. His voice failed. Another collapsed to the ground. Moments later, power returned. She was gone. Security cameras recording that exact area? Every single one failed. Only during the encounter. Perfectly timed. No footage recovered. No evidence found. No statement released. The owner demanded silence. But fear is louder than secrecy. And the story escaped. Panic at St. John the Baptist main church. The most public, and psychologically devastating, incident occurred in the city center, in front of the Igreja Matriz de São João Batista. It was a calm afternoon. Families talking. Children laughing. Elders resting in the shade. Then people began to stare. Near a side entrance of the church. She stood. Still. Colorless. Unnatural. She said nothing. She did nothing. Yet everything collapsed. People wept uncontrollably. Others screamed in terror. Some froze. Some fainted. Chaos erupted like fire. For a brief moment. Witnesses swore the church bells rang on their own. Others claimed she looked up. Not at the church. But at something above it. Something invisible. Something there. Police arrived. She was gone. But panic remained. After the unthinkable. Life eventually resumed shape. Children played. Farmers worked. Tourists returned. Cheese continued to bring pride to the region. But those who lived through 1996. They still feel it. They avoid certain roads. They close windows earlier. They remember nights when the sky wasn't theirs. Officially. Nothing happened in São João Batista do Glória. Unofficially. It survived one of the most disturbing, ignored, and concealed chapters of Brazil's UFO history. The shadow that remains. 1996 was not a single event. It was not just Varginha. It was not isolated. Brazil experienced a wave. A movement. A presence. And São João Batista do Glória was part of it. A chapter almost erased. A fear almost forgotten. A truth never granted permission to exist. But truth does not require permission. Some stories live quietly underneath history. Some cases never really close. They wait. And sometimes. They return. The Red Sky Collective. From that moment forward. This was no longer folklore. It was a case. Testimonies that refused to fade. Fear lives differently inside those who witnessed the inexplicable. A retired teacher remembers waking in the middle of the night to silence so complete, it felt like sound itself had died. When he looked outside, the cattle stood frozen, eyes fixed on the sky, and above them hovered a pale, pulsating light that cast no shadow. It wasn't bright. It wasn't loud. It simply existed, and that was terrifying enough. A mother reported something stranger. Her young son, normally lively and fearless, began drawing the same figure over and over, a tall, thin, dark shape with elongated arms and a face with no features. When she asked why he kept drawing it, the boy answered in a tone far too calm for his age. Because it keeps standing outside my window at night. No one slept well after that. The police record that was never meant to surface. The involvement of authorities became inevitable. At first, the police dismissed everything as hysteria. But then came calls they could not ignore, cattle mutilations reported silently at dawn, terrified families refusing to leave their homes after dark, and officers themselves reporting unexplained nausea and overwhelming dread when approaching affected areas. A confidential internal log, never meant for the public, quietly circulated among researchers years later. It described patrol units encountering an unregistered aerial object hovering silently in rural outskirts. No rotor. No engine. No aircraft signature. The vehicle dashboard cameras failed, simultaneously. The official report, equipment malfunction. But those who were there never believed the paperwork. Something walked the farmland. What happened at the dairy farm did not stay contained. More workers came forward, anonymously. Some claimed machinery refused to operate for minutes at a time, as if something unseen had drained the very life from the place. Others reported seeing a pale, human-like figure standing among the stalls, unmoving, staring into nothing, as though it existed out of time while everything around it remained frozen. Several cows were later found standing perfectly still, as if locked in shock, eyes wide and unresponsive. Veterinarians found no medical explanation. And though security cameras recorded nothing, someone, somewhere, seemed to know more than they were willing to say. The night the town lost its breath. Nothing prepared the town for what happened at Igreja Matriz de São João Batista. It was not an isolated sighting. It was not a rumor. It was not something whispered in darkness. It happened in public. In daylight. And it shattered both silence and sanity. Witnesses insist the figure appeared as if stepping out of thin air, standing motionless by the church's side entrance. The bells rang without human hands. People cried without understanding why. Terror did not spread like panic, it fell like gravity. This was no longer just a UFO story. It was psychological invasion. The presence that would not leave. Even after the sighting stopped, something remained. People claimed dreams changed. Shadows behaved differently. And at times, the sky seemed to stare back. Fishermen along the Rio Grande spoke of strange distant lights moving under the water's surface like silent specters. Farmers swore that on certain nights, the air hummed softly, like a power line in a storm, except there was no storm. If what came in 1996 left, it didn't leave completely. The shadow of the 1996 Brazilian UFO wave. While newspapers talked only about Varginha, Brazil was not living one story. It was drowning in many. Multiple cities. Multiple witnesses. Different manifestations. But the same feeling. Something unknown was moving across Brazil in 1996. And São João Batista do Glória was simply one of the places brave enough to remember. The town returned to life. The Serra de Canastra still stands ancient and proud. The Rio Grande still flows. And the region continues producing some of the greatest cheese in Brazil. As if normality never broke. But beneath calm skies lives a truth carved in silence. Sometimes what descends, never truly leaves.